Good morning, everybody. Whoops, sorry, back away from the mic slowly. Thank you so much for joining us today for Dr. Laura Mandell's presentation on Rethinking the Scholarly Monograph in the Digital Age. This program is part of an ongoing series of talks and workshops in the Digital Humanities, and it's been sponsored by the Edmund Lowe Library and the College of Arts and Sciences. We're very fortunate to have Dr. Laura Mandell here with us today from Texas A&M, where she is the director for the Initiative for Digital Humanities, Media, and Culture. Additionally, she's the director of the Poetess Archive, 18th Connect, and the Advanced Research Consortium, which is home to 18th Connect, along with NINES, or the Networked Infrastructure for 19th Century Electronic Scholarship, MESA, the Medieval Electronic Scholarly Archive, and ModNets, among others. She's been involved with a great array of projects over the years, and I won't enumerate all of them, but as someone involved with the scanning and OCRing of documents, I am personally particularly indebted to her for her leadership on the Early Modern OCR project, which improved the accuracy with which we can turn scanned images into readable text for early modern and 18th century texts. She's also the author of many publications, and her most recent book is Breaking the Book, Print Humanities in the Digital Age, which I suspect bears significantly on today's talk. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Mandell.
Thank you. Mary gets an A+ for knowing what NINES stood for. The director of NINES was on NPR and was asked what the acronym stood for and couldn't remember. So good job. Thank you so much for having me. This is a project I'm working on and have been working on since Breaking the Book. And it's, what comes after the print monograph. All of our cultural heritage is being digitized. Now I've started to notice that about one article in every journal issue discusses digital documents in some way, even performs data mining. So as our cultural heritage becomes digitized, researchers have to step up to the plate to learn how to do things with that digital work. Research is going to become a matter of being able to manipulate digital texts and images. So what will happen to the monograph, the scholarly monograph? And at least those of us in English, and I'm sure anthropology and history, care deeply about the monograph, the experience as a writer and a reader of a long, sustained argument that very carefully documents research steps. So I'm trying to think about that. This is a two-part project. It's going to be published in 2 venues. And my talk today is just a presentation that, I'm going to be speaking. I'm not going to be reading. So I want you to feel free to interrupt or raise your hand. This is going to be an interactive presentation. So because I'm sure there are things that I don't know that I would love to know about, and ideas you have that I would love to hear. So the Mondell Foundation is going whole hog in trying to think about what happens with the scholarly monograph and with, in particular, scholarly publishing. So they have given grants of $1 million or so to several university presses, West Virginia University, Stanford University. And Stanford University, like some others, promises to do things that are really innovative by making these new monographs interactive. However, I have reviewed some of the materials for the Stanford University Press, and one of the projects was really no more than a digital coffee book. And even this one, which claims to be innovative and interactive, it's basically images, and they've allowed for mapping where those images are, which is not much more than images plus maps, which is, again, a coffee table book. It's difficult to try to reimagine and do things that are new. One of the longest standing projects that has tried to leverage the affordances of digital media, not just take print media and slap it online, is Scalar Press. I'm sure some of you know Scalar Press, and you can all get accounts there and create projects yourself, and even get them peer-reviewed. Scalar is primarily targeted towards people who are working in media studies, because what it allows is it allows you to put up video clips from movies that are copyrighted. They even have cleared copyright for you, and annotate. As the movie plays, annotations can scroll. So here is an example of a scholarly monograph that was not really about media so much, that Scalar Press put up. Unfortunately, the videos in it are just a little bit of a talking head. So again, difficult to figure out what to do if you're not looking at media. There's Media Commons Press, and it was developed by Kathleen Fitzpatrick. She now directs scholarly communications at MLA. And so MLA Commons is in Media Commons Press. I think the name has been changed since I made this slide to Humanities Commons, however. So here is MLA Commons Press, a literary studies in the digital age, and it's quite lovely. The articles were first given as presentations at one of the MLA conferences and have been put up, and things are added to it all the time. So at least the content of an anthology is dynamic. Kathleen Fitzpatrick wrote and published Planned Obsolescence in Media Commons Press. Many of you know this already. And the there we go. The commenting was very interesting. She had peer reviewers actually of the monograph itself leave their comments, their peer reviewing comments in the margins, and then adjusted things as she worked with those comments. But you can still see them there, and Lisa Spiro's are particularly wonderful. Sorry, I didn't know what that was. At any rate, planned obsolescence. Now, the problem with Media Commons Press is actually recruiting people to come and comment. I mean, not many people want to spend their work lives commenting on other people's writing, and so that hasn't quite been figured out. And, especially in terms of, Kathleen used planned obsolescence for tenure. She was granted tenure, but the notion was that instead of a P&T committee, instead of just seeing that your monograph was accepted by a university press, they would be able to go in and see all the peer reviewer comments. Now, I don't know how many of you have worked on P&T committees, but oh my God, the amount of time that would take. And it's so much easier to say, oh, okay, Stanford University Press, tenure, right? But not many P&T committees, not many of the people on them have the time to really read the monograph itself, let alone comments on the monograph to determine the quality. It's a wonderful dream of how the Academy should function. I think more and more people are not even reading articles, and it's this thing where we're kind of producing, and our rate of production is outstripping our rate of consumption by quite a bit. Yes?
So, in the past, your incentive to do peer review was that you could then say, you're on the editorial board.
Mm-hmm.
These comments are just, anyone can comment. Anyone can read the text, make a comment.
Yes. And, when you do peer...
You have a lot of free time.
Right, and exactly. So those people who comment who are not commissioned to do so aren't on the editorial board. It's difficult to tell really excellent comments from, somebody who stopped by and said, hey, this is stupid or whatever. And then the other problem is that typically peer review of books and articles, I mean, they're detailed and you have to write 4 pages, but leaving public comments is quite a bit more work. So, world enough in time. If we all had the time for this, this is a lovely dream. Here is a Scalar Press publication, which, you know, is supposed to be one of their most innovative. It's in Scalar 2. And it's Complex TV by Jason Middle. It's really well suited to this because there's video clips from all these television sitcoms that he's arguing about, and so they can be available in the Scalar Press instance. But all he did was put up the book along with the video clips. So you can even see that when you come to pages, it tells you what the pages are in the hard copy of the book. So it's not really digitally born. I mean, you've got these wonderful video clips. Not many of them have annotations on them, which is the real capacity of Scalar, that annotations can scroll as the video plays. Jason Middle also put his book in Media Commons Press. I don't know how many comments are there, and it's published in print. And there's just not that much difference between all 3, which means we haven't really gotten very far in terms of creating digital monographs.
Because I am very familiar with that book and with Jason.
Yes.
And he really found the process of publishing it on Media Commons helpful because he did get a lot of really detailed commentary and he responded to it.
That's great. Now, was that before the print publication?
It was a print publication before it was on Scale. I didn't even know about the Scalar one.
Okay, so he was able to use those comments to revise before.
Yes.
That's brilliant. Thank you for telling me that. That's wonderful. So that is the value, right, is the interaction, is getting comments before you publish. And, you know, typically you do with peer review, but that's 1 or 2 readers. And I changed the title of a book, my first book, based on 1 reader, and nobody knows what the word means. Nobody. I used misogynist instead of misogynist. And nobody knows, misogynist, what's that? Misogynist, I get that. Anyway, so Building Manifold. This is a new project Mellon funded in a second round of funding from the University of Minnesota Press, run by Matthew Gold. And it's just fabulous. And it's Building Manifold Scholarship is this software that you can now use. And it allows for, again, detailed commenting interaction. And it says that it has 2 goals. One is to create a collaborative open source platform for scholarly works and annotation tools, and then also so that you can make the monograph iterative. In other words, you iterate a version, people comment, you iterate another version. So this is a way of rethinking. It's very, very robust on the back end in terms of thinking about how things will go together for editorial boards and for publishers. And it's open source, so you can download it and create your own manifold version. This too, though, has a part of it that is devoted to digitally born projects. So instead of just taking the monograph and putting it up there, which a lot of them are, a lot of the original things in beta are just monographs that have been put up there, and now you can comment on them. But there's a digitally born version where you actually put up all your notes as you work through and create the project. I don't know how that's going to work. There's nothing there yet. There's just the announcements project kickoff for all the projects, and none of them have any other materials yet. So we'll have to see how that goes. The question, of course, is, will people be willing to give input at the research stage, and what kinds of credit do they need or will they get? The interface itself, very, very robust on the back end, is not very exciting on the front end. I mean, it has a highlight function, an annotate function, and in beta it says, we're not sure your annotations are going to be saved, you know, annotate at your own risk, and a share function which allows you to tweet or post on Facebook. Not as iterative as one would like, not as you know, the annotations, I mean, Jason Middle is the kind of person who would read the annotations and revise. But what about publishing the annotations themselves? Would that be possible? There's a new call, and people in the room should take note who are interested in this. The Mondell Foundation has funded the NHPRC, the National Historical Publications and Records Commission. And the Mellon is strategically funding them right now at a time when funding will be cut, probably at the federal level. But you can see here, I mean, I should say I don't really know, I'm guessing, because the Mellon Foundation would not like me to speak for them. So I don't know, I'm guessing. That's Laura Mandell's view. At any rate, the digital publishing edition publishing cooperatives is a new call. They actually today at 3 o'clock have a webinar if you want to go to it and hear more about the call. And it's trying to get people to, you've got siloed editions, how can they communicate with each other? What kinds of publishing mechanisms would allow those things to be interoperable and to do things that they've never been able to do before, that just a single edition couldn't do. They wouldn't have the coding power or the computing power to do them. Really exciting. We don't know what will come from that. So what about giving credit to these people who just stop by and leave great annotations who are not then put on an editorial board? How do we give credit? So Hypothesis is a wonderful example. I know people have used it here. It's a wonderful example of how fabulous annotations can be. They now have 1 million annotations. Professors use it in classrooms with their students. And this was a particularly robust annotation set that I just thought was fabulous on its own. Couldn't it be published as its own article or scholarly research? There is innovation in that regard. The Canadian Writing Research Collaboratory, run by Susan Brown, which was funded by an Innovation Canada grant, has developed the Quirk Writer. And the Quirk Writer allows for you to bring into it text in TEI format, or you can bring in plain text and TEI encode in the Quirk Writer. The amazing thing about Quirk Writer is it allows for annotating and adding linked open data. So linked open data, a lot of you are librarians and probably know more about it than I do, so feel free to interject, is a method of assigning a unique identifier, a URI, to entities and names so that they can be available to the web as a whole for use and for connecting with other things in other places that have the same unique identifiers. So if the Orlando Project has information on the poet Mary Barber and the Poetess Archive has information on the poet Mary Barber, if we both assign URIs, then somebody who's searching, using the APIs from both and investigating linked open data entities will find them and connect them and know they're the same person. It's especially important with women writers because Anna Barbeau is Anna Letitia Barbeau, Anna Aiken, Mrs. A.L. Barbeau. All of those variants need to be disambiguated with a unique identifier. This will allow us to find, it will turn the web, the semantic web as they call it, into a giant database. It will allow us to search across any number of projects to find information. The annotation model that Quirk is using was developed by Stanford, the shared Canvas data model, and they developed the open annotation model, which OAC, I know a lot of you know, is now the gold standard for annotation. It's got important guiding principles that people need to follow to make annotations shareable. This is an image of a DBpedia use of RDF. So you can see that things that have been identified are connected to each other. Linked open data, often called triples, will say, for instance, Anna Letitia Barbeau, entity, URI, authored or created the poem 1811, and 1811 title, unique identifier, type, DC type poem can be added. So it's an amazing way of really enriching data so that it can be used by researchers. And that's just a data hub that provides RDF to DBpedia and then links to it so you can get to the resource that they've described. So linked open data holds a lot of promise, I think, for humanists. I'd love to hear gainsayers. Among computer scientists, they all think, oh my God, is that clunky? And I don't know how many of you have read the wonderful piece by, I'm forgetting his name now, but it's about images, and it's called Pictures Can't Say Ain't. Well, neither can RDF. It doesn't say not. So that's a difficulty. It's a very primitive kind of syntax. It's certainly not syntax of a natural language, not even close. So, there are problems, but it will allow us to seek patterns, to network data over multiple resources, to build knowledge, to do all kinds of analysis of time span, changes over time span. Yes?
So I have a question. I've worked just a little bit with RDF in my own project.
Yes.
But one of the key functionalities of humanities research is the ability to cite your sources. Is that possible to do in RDF yet?
So, cite your sources.
So you have, instead of having a triple where you have a subject, an object, and a verb,
Right.
I want a fourth element that allows me to say, what does this assertion come from?
Right. So, I mean, theoretically, though, the triple links to the source it's from. So, in other words, to make that graph, to send people to this source of the RDF, the triple in some way identifies which resource, which store has that triple in it.
But within the store, so the store just makes an assertion with no...
The store makes an assertion. However, the store itself should have those citations in the whatever interface it has associated with it. But yeah, I mean, that's devoutly to be wished, so I think you're right. But theoretically, this is a way of networking stores and should always send you back to the original store where you can get more information. I mean, I hope, yeah. Susan Brown just recently finished some LOD work, trying to use LOD to data mine for genre, and it didn't work. And I think you'll love this story. There were a lot of problems with the data, and she lists all the problems in her forthcoming article. But the main problem is that humanist-created data stores and even library-created data stores, and you know this from working with Mark and ModNets, right, or mods, is that they have strings that contain strings, a lot of the fields that differ, and you just can't mine them if you've got varying strings. So, one will say Anna Barbeau, one will say Mrs. A.L. Barbeau. If you assign a URI, you can use it, but they typically don't. And then also, especially with humanists, humanists presume that whoever's going to be reading their data is another scholar who understands the context, and a machine doesn't. You have to make it available for the machine. But what she discovered that I think was very paradoxical, ironic, she says, is that the best for using linked open data methods of investigation is DBpedia, and OCLC is terrible. Now, I don't think that will surprise librarians, because OCLC is kind of it's agglomerative, and I don't think it's been cleaned, and I think that it's just big. Any thoughts on that? Yeah.
It's enormous. It contains a lot of very old data.
Right.
That was basically converting a catalog card to a
Right.
readable record.
Right.
That's all it is.
Right.
And they have done some cleaning, but we're approaching 1 billion records
Yeah.
in the world yet. So they've done their best to do some cleaning and deduping, but it's too big.
It's a mammoth task. I mean, I think adding URIs, which obviates in some ways the need to clean. If you make it linked open data, you can leave the strings all varying in what they say and add a URI. That might be the next step for OCLC.
They and the Library of Congress are working on it.
I believe that, and also if there are named entity parsers that can automatically find entities and provisionally assign URIs. They have to be checked by humans sometimes. I don't know what you do with 1 billion, because each record will contain multiple. Yes.
We need more humans.
Yes, we need more humans. So I'm now going to talk about thinking about the monograph as a visual a virtual research environment. So there has been this wonderful woman working on cataloging all the digital editions that are available. And I don't know how many of you are on Humanist, but a questionnaire is sent out, and we're all asked to submit our digital editions. Her name is Greta Franini, is that it? Franzini, thank you. And she has this amazing catalog, which you can go through and peruse and see all the different kinds of digital editions and their functionalities. The good news first is that many use XML TEI, which those of you who don't know what it is, in 1968, a group of humanists and linguists and scholars all got together and decided what kind of tags we should all use in common for coding text. And it's gone through several iterations, but now it's in XML. And of course, the problem with software is that it evolves so fast that by the time you finish a digital edition, you don't even have a platform you can use it on, because it's already, the technology is outdated. XML, and particularly TEI XML, the Text Encoding Initiative Consortium's tag set, using those things will help people not make an edition that's permanent forever, but it will help people transform into the newest technology. Because if we're all of us who made editions and all use TEI in the same boat and need to upgrade to something else, I mean, right now we're displaying these things on the internet, these editions. What about when we get a chip and insert it in our brain to read? That's 30 years down the road, right? So we're going to need to have those things coded so that they can be transformed into whatever platform they need to be used for reading or using as a student or annotating. So using this code means at least we're a community, at least we're a group of people who can help each other upgrade as software changes. And I think it's really good for libraries, and again, I would love your opinion on this, because the worst example, Jerome McGann's Rossetti archive. He refused to use TEI. He picked his own SGML code. He's retired now. The president of the university mandated that UVA libraries had to take in the Rossetti archive and sustain it, and they can't, right? So, I mean, if there's not something that libraries can sort of set something up that will read it, like TEI, there's XTF from the California Digital Libraries. There's a couple things that you can just set up. There's a couple out-of-the-box platforms. I think Omeka has now got a TEI plugin. So there's these content management, content viewer systems that allow taking the code and making it visible. When the scholar stops hosting their website, what does the library do? How do they host it? It needs to be in some format that they're not constantly, libraries aren't making for every professor's work a new platform to host it. You just can't do that. I don't know if you had similar experiences here with people depositing things that you don't know what to do with, or not yet. Okay, it's coming. The bad news is that a lot of people are not using XML at all. Some are using XML that's not TEI, and that's the Rossetti archive. So it's coming. They aren't very innovative, these editions that have been tracked. Only this number of them, half roughly, make access to the data available. If you're a researcher, you want to take all those TEI encoded documents and do something with them, data mine them in some way. Indexes provided, a little less than half, so they aren't even indexed. Very difficult to use. Advanced search functionalities, okay, half have that, a little more than half have advanced search functionalities. Actually, oh, sorry, that's no information provided. Look at that. Look how small that is with the advanced search functionalities. Okay, I missed my yes. These are really small amounts. My favorite visualization in this archive is a visualization that's going to help you find all these digital editions. And somebody should have thought about the stop words maybe and taking them out. But what it reminds me of, and I feel like it's so emblematic of our moment, this is one of the first printed title pages. I mean, the early print, 1571. And it's one of the images that caused the Text Creation Partnership to decide they couldn't OCR and had to type everything. Because when you OCR this, the only word you get out of it is the. But it reminds me of that because, the is the most important in incunables. And we are at a digital incunable moment. In other words, we're just beginning. All of these early print books, of course, imitated manuscript writing, and we are imitating print. We have not gotten away from imitating print to the extent that we need to. So one example of something that is getting away from it is Voyant Tools. It's now a Voyant 2, so it doesn't look like this anymore. I mean, I can't make my slides fast enough, But this is all of Shakespeare's texts in a Voyant window, which has multiple tools inside it. It has, of course, a word cloud, and you can eliminate stop words and add stop words so that you can eliminate more, and you can get it to be very interesting. It has trends of word usage of the top words. You can select words and graph their usage across the set of texts. It takes in TEI, plain text, HTML, anything you want to put into it, and it will spit out TEI for you. Fast way to encode if you're going to encode. It now has, Voyant 2 is about to release topic modeling capacities. It has principal component analysis. It has all the things that you would love to be able to do if you were a data miner, and you can just load the data and they do the data mining for you. These are actually all separate windows, and they can be exported. So the new book, hermeneutic.ca, by Jeffrey Rockwell and Stephen Sinclair, has a chapter in it, Now Analyze That, which is also available online. And they send you to the online version because in the online version, they have Voyant windows. Now, when you put a Voyant window in a web page or anything that's online, it stays live. So you can, while you're reading, manipulate the data. And you can say, oh, okay, well, I want to, they're talking about committed to repetition. I want to load the data myself, and I want to search for way. And so I can, they are talking here about time, but I can say that's not the important word, and I can change the word and look for something else. The ideal for me would be that then I could leave an annotation, something that says, well, your conclusions are right, but if you were to start your search 15 years earlier, that would change the result. If you were to search for this set of collocated terms, that would change your result and you would have a different conclusion. And leave that annotation there, published, peer-reviewed and published. That would be the ideal, so that these get turned into, so scholarly articles and monographs get turned into virtual research environments where scholars participate in an evolving discussion. Rockwell and Sinclair, who've been digital humanists forever, are the most open to this kind of thing. A lot of the data miners, even when they say they want to make things open and interactive, don't want you to mess with their arguments, right? And so it's a really hard, because of course you're going to say they're wrong. And we have a lot of shame in that as scholars. You know, will they get tenure if there's some annotation that says, you know what you forgot, you know? And so I'm going to also talk about comparing texts. In a virtual research environment, wouldn't it be fabulous if we could compare text as we were working? This is Juxta Commons, and it allows you to set up editions of things or compare editions of things. And here's Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the 1818 version and the 1831 version. And you can see here that in the first version, nobody got that Walton was a foil for Victor. So in the second version, she has Victor turn to Walton and say, "Unhappy man, do you share my madness?" As a way to hit people over the head and say, compare these two characters, right? So it's wonderful for students to see that, to see how revision works and to see it evolving. So what if instead of these arguments that can then get attacked, we had virtual research environments that were about search and discovery and posing provisional hypotheses? One of the tools that we're building at Texas A&M, ARC is building it, the Advanced Research Consortium, is Big Diva. And I've presented it at the University of Rochester on their big screen. I understand you all have a big screen. I would love to come present it here. And that's the Rochester one. What it allows you to do is to search through all of the metadata that's in NINES, 18th Connect, MESA, and ModNets, all hand-curated metadata, all peer-reviewed scholarly projects, or this is, for instance, a manuscript in the Walters Museum. We have metadata from the Walters Museum, and it allows you to search through it, trace your search path, and get to the original thing on their website. We don't take in their data, just metadata about it so that we can push people out. But the nice thing about this is, what we'd like to do eventually is to make it possible to actually save those searches, export those searches into a virtual research environment. So again, people can say, yes, but if you had if you'd ended your search at 1730, you wouldn't be getting the same results. JSTOR Labs is working on a number of things that are going to help us have virtual research environments. And I know you've seen some of this. I don't know how many of you have seen the recent topic graph. So JSTOR in the fall hosted a workshop at Columbia that I was privileged to attend, where they got a bunch of people together to think about what the monograph needed to be. And of course, I was arguing madly for a virtual research environment. They said, not yet, Laura, not yet. And what they did is they did user studies of graduate students and professors and all these people using monographs to figure out what they needed. And what they need is new modes of searching through monographs. So they deployed topic graph, which is each book in the topic graph has been topic modeled. Now, topic modeling is really interesting. If you want to think about the change in information, information models, indexing is a good way to think about it. With manuscripts, there weren't often page numbers. Eventually there were page numbers. But with manuscripts, every edition was a single thing. During the time that people were reading manuscripts, and even during the early print era, before there were page numbers, people kept commonplace books. And Anne Moss has a wonderful book about commonplacing. It was a whole different way of thinking. You organized everything you thought under headings that had been defined by Aristotle. And what you did when you got that commonplace book is you just used it. In other words, there was no sense of plagiarism whatsoever. That was copia. It was a copiousness of rhetoric, and you just used it. So you would just cite it, or say it. You weren't citing. You were just saying. Then came indexing right around the time that Locke began writing. The index started to come into existence with page numbers and regular editions. And Pope and Swift make fun of it. It features in the Dunciad. Indexes are for people who don't want to read. They just use the index. But it's a crucial tool for us in our research arsenal. Now there's topic modeling. And the interesting thing about topic modeling is it's a machine goes through and finds words that occur most often together. And they aren't what we would consider topics in the commonplace sense, nor topics in the index sense. They're very different because you can't just sort of take the top words and say, oh, okay, that makes a topic. It's all of them. Ben Schmidt has written a wonderful piece about that. It's the relationship of all of them. And it's something we don't perceive as human readers. Now, what JSTOR has done is they've sort of named these topics. The machine didn't do that. And it allows you to search through. But if you're searching, this is the topic. I have to go see. This is the topic women, and you can see the words are highlighted, and the topic includes reader, literary, novel, narrative, and you might say to yourself, well, what does that have to do with women? Well, you know, it does in her book, right? It does in her book. So JSTOR is thinking about removing some of the words because they feel that people will feel like it's not working. But Andrew Piper has just finished a book that will be published by University of Chicago Press, I believe, where he talks about the conceptual difference between topic modeling and anything we've known. It's just going to be a new way of thinking for us. So JSTOR Labs is a great place to look. I don't know how many of you have used or seen Understanding Shakespeare. A wonderful tool. You can open any play in it, and whenever you come to a line and you see like 10 here or 12 there, and you click on the line, all of the articles that cite that line appear on the side, and you can get to them. So this is an example from my book, Breaking the Book, which I know some of you have read, but I read in that book Paul Daman's Blindness and Insight, the Rhetoric of Temporality, and notice that he's misquoting a quotation, a passage of Wordsworth's, on which he hangs his whole deconstructive thesis. And it's not just accidentally misquoted. It's pretty intentionally misquoted. I mean, I think he was laughing into his sleeve at us. So, you know, wouldn't it be nice if in our virtual research environments we could prevent that from happening, where somebody says, okay, I'm going to quote this passage, and the machine retrieves it and brings it to you in the form that it really exists. Yes?
So his statement wasn't accurate?
Oh, I can show you. He just changed the words of the quotation. So he says, Wordsworth is asking, and the spirit of the answer, the question that Wordsworth is asking is, where does this river go? That's the one he's answering, about to answer. And there's an interpolation there as to the whereabouts of the river, which is wrong. But some of the words have been changed, so you can see, and the spirit of the answer must have been, though, the spirit of the answer as to the whereabouts of the river through, must have been, though, the word might be sea or ocean, though the word might be sea or ocean, through the word. Through the word. So what Daman's argument is about how words to Wordsworth are unstable, right? So he's changed though and taken out sea or ocean and says the spirit of the answer through the word. Wordsworth is commenting on the word. Well, he's not there. He's talking about seas and oceans. Might be a certain stream. I don't see that. And then this is great. These might have been the letter, but the spirit of the answer, these might have been the latter. And the latter refers up to a real object in nature. So it's actually fraud. It's actually fraud.
It's not just poor translation?
No, Daman is writing in English. It's English. No, this is a deliberate Yeah. There's actually a book about him as a pathological liar. And
Well, yeah, that whole controversy about
yeah,
the Belgian
yeah,
collaborationist
right.
thing.
But this is the most remarkable to me. And I didn't find this, one of my graduate students did, right? He came up to me and said, Dr. Mandell, I don't think that Daman quoted properly. I was like, really? Because who checks, you know? Who checks? So,
So there's no mediator,
there's what?
there's no mediator.
No, and
Maybe there was an editor, there's no mediator.
right, and so now, but let's think about this, and this is why I am so arguing for the virtual monograph to revitalize our discipline. The only people editing blindness and insight are Damanians. They're not going to put in a footnote there that says, oh, he misquoted deliberately and this is the real quotation. They're not going to do it. Now, I could publish about that, but it would come out in a journal called Notes and Queries, and nobody would ever find it. I want that fact attached to the monograph so that people reading Daman now can see what he did. How does that happen? Well, it's possible in a digital environment. It's possible if annotations are linked to the original document in some way, whether it's through RDF or OAC or whatever. It's really, really important that the annotation be there with the item. The other thing that's really, really important is being able to change the algorithms used and the underlying data. So this was published in an article. It was actually changed later, but it's Matthew Jocker saying, male and female writers differ dramatically in terms of thematic and stylistic elements. Well, this is allegedly cutting-edge digital work, right? But it's presented as a static graph in a PDF and as a static image in a book. I don't know what thematic elements, I can't explore it. I can't adjust the data set to see if it's true over all data sets. That's what needs to happen. In other words, the most cutting-edge digital work is still monograph thinking. It's still ensconced in monograph thinking until we can get it using the affordances of digital media. And that's going to be hard. But as Alan Liu has pointed out in an essay called The Meaning of Digital Humanities, you know, any result, like that result you saw from Matthew Jockers, and I have an article coming out about that in Debates in Digital Humanities, I hope, keep your fingers crossed, that really does show what's wrong with that analysis. But any work by a data scientist is a matter of adjusting parameters. You adjust the data set, you clean the data set, you adjust the parameters you use to search. It's an interaction. A lot of data miners are claiming this is new objective information. It's not. It's an interaction between human and machine. If you make it available in a virtual research environment, other interactions will make that data speak differently, right? Or other data will make those algorithms speak differently. So Susan Brown and I came up with an idea for the Text Mining the Novel group. There's one use case scenario where somebody just wants to go and use some kind of research environment. So, you know, Ted Underwood has this novel collection, and he's searched for various topics. This person comes and wants to look at, wants to look at blush or blushing or something that Ted isn't interested in. So that's one use of a virtual research environment. The second one is to use it as original thinking, as producing your own article. So you've got the code, you've got the underlying data, the raw data, you can massage the data differently, you can edit the code. That would be really original research, even though you're using something that somebody else started with and changing it. That's, I think, what needs to happen. Michael Gavin has proposed a data journal in which, and I think librarians will like this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts, where we actually publish the data used for anything. Because people trying to recreate, I mean, these results are rarely reproducible. And it has to do with the way the data has been cleared, cleaned and munged and manipulated. So publish the data set, publish a list of things you did to it, give a data a narrative about what you did to this data, of how a specific data set was created. So a design narrative data, a data set design narrative with every data set that you publish. And it will help with humanities data curation. It will also help further knowledge. That has not been funded. Methods Commons is something that Jeffrey Rockwell built, and it has code in it that you can get and reuse. So we do have the capacity to publish code and manipulate it. And Ted Underwood religiously publishes all his data sets, so you can take the data set and manipulate it. And then he links to it in his library's repository. So now the question comes of peer review. And there are some new methods of peer review that would speed things up if we have a virtual research environment and annotations that are left. We could use the Journal of Digital Humanities model, which involves taking things from Digital Humanities Now, which picks top tweeted and top retweeted and top liked items that are available on the internet, and then sends it out to about 100 reviewers, and they all comment briefly, and then it's published in the Journal of Digital Humanities Now. It speeds it up. But I have to say, here's Laura being very, very cranky. I have been working in digital humanities since 1990, well, never mind, somewhere in the 90s when the internet came into existence, and I worked on the romantic chronology with Alan Liu. Everybody says, oh, I can't do that because of tenure and promotion, And peer review, yeah, you can slap anything up on the web, so I'm not doing that. And the amount of time it would take me to make a data set, I'm not going to get credit for that. I'm very, very impatient with this now because I feel that the discipline of English literature anyway, I won't speak for anybody else, is teetering on the edge of utter inconsequence. And unless we get out there and roll up our sleeves and start working with the data that's available and making it available to people and building research environments where we can all let go of our shame and our fear and create cumulative knowledge and demonstrate to people that we're doing that. Unless we can do that, we are going to continue to lose funding, to lose place, to lose all of the things that people care about. So I've lost patience. I feel like, okay, so you've got tenure now, so just do it. That's a Nike commercial. Oh well. Anyway, thank you, and I'll take any questions. Yes.
Well, a bit on that last note, what extent do you think that maybe is a generational thing? Because I got my doctorate in early 90s, and then digital started exploding, and I'm now an academic library and English liaison librarian, but I kind of watch it from a distance, and I've noticed that there's been more and more of a shift, at least with baby steps, towards people accepting non-traditional kind of monograph publications as the gold standard for IT, but it still there's a big generation that's on the brink of retiring within the next 5 to 10 years, and I wonder if that'll be a big sea change at some point.
So there have been changes. The biggest change is that now every English department on the face of the earth wants to hire a digital humanist. From 2000 to the present, the job ads for digital humanities, tenure track professors has gone up 19%. That's more than all the languages have decreased. So it's a huge demand for a job. The catch is you get a job doing digital humanities and you don't get tenured for digital humanities work. So I always tell junior scholars, when you get that digital humanities job, you have to have in writing that the work that they hired you to do is the work that you will be tenured for. Because the deans and the administrators and all the people who are forward-looking say, yes, let's do it. The department says, yes, let's do it. And then the P&T committee is traditional scholars who say, this isn't research, this is service. Now, some web things are service. Some things are service. Some things are teaching. And some are genuinely research. And so, you know, there has to be a distinction. I'm not saying P&T committee should go away. But I do think there's a real problem right now. The earlier problem was that nobody was doing it. Jerome McGann created Nines as a way of preventing a brain drain, young scholars not working on the digital at all, because your work is peer-reviewed by Nines or 18th Connect and accepted as a peer-reviewed item, and that letter can go to your P&T committee, which really helps bridge the gap between traditional P&T committees and the, you know, the new digital scholars. But there's not enough of that. There's not enough peer review. Those are very field-specific, very discipline-specific. There isn't enough of that. And what about peer review of substantial annotations and reworkings of things that other people have created? I mean, we need that whole system in place because those are major contributions to thinking. You know, and I have to say, again, I look at this and I think, when I think about what's coming, the possibilities are coming, any discipline that does not reward the research that makes the most difference to everybody in the world is a dying discipline. So we've got to figure it out, and fast. Yeah. Yeah.
Does permanence matter anymore? We have 300-year-old printed monographs. Are descendants going to be reading 300-year-old annotations?
Can anybody else answer that question? I mean, when I worked at the British Library, when I was writing my dissertation, I walked by a Gutenberg Bible, you know, and it was in a case. I mean, every time I went to the restroom, there it was. Then I was at this, colloquium funded by the Mondell Foundation, organized by Jerome McGann, and the dean of the University of Michigan Libraries, whose last name I'm forgetting because I'm getting senile and last names go, Paul Courant, sat at the table and said, when you're building digital things, use it or lose it. We're not maintaining it if it's not being used. And I thought, nobody said that to Gutenberg. I don't know.
Oh, he's retired.
He's retired. Who cares about his resource? Yeah. Yes.
I have a question about the kind of the end of a project, which is different in the model that you're projecting, right? When you write a monograph, you kind of be, okay, it's done, it's out of my hands, people can read it, and I can move on to a new project or think about something else. If you have a project that's adjustable, changeable, interactive, people are commenting on it, you know, years after you kind of create the first piece of it, where is the author's kind of endpoint in the project? Do you constantly have to go back and respond to those people who took the time to adjust your project? At what point are you kind of stuck in that and not able to say, okay, I'm done? Otherwise, it looks like you just abandoned it. If like activity slows down when you see that no one's commenting or replying, you know. So I guess that's one question I have is sort of how do we think about the end of a project differently?
So that's such an excellent question. And what it shows me is one of the ways that our digital editions are just print editions put online, right? So if you are a scholar right now and you work 2 to 5 years on a monograph, right? You get it all perfect. You get all the citations. You've got lots of peer review. You've been to the archives. You've done this, that, and the other. You've searched all the archives so that you can make that claim, right? And then it's printed, and you're done. And boy, are you done. You just want to get away. You can't get away fast enough. And people email you and say, can you come speak about it? And you're like, please, no, I don't want to think about it, right? But this is going to be different because if we just do that, if we just take that thing that people have worked on for 5 years and put up and make that the digital thing, of course nobody's going to want to. And there'll be precious little interaction you can do. Like this person has a barricaded argument, right? So what you want is something different to start with. Something that's provisional, something that's asking questions, something that says, in this data set, Anybody know of any others? You know, I mean, something that is more of a collaborative monograph. Otherwise, it's just, and it will take too long. It would take too long and it would be too fruitless. Nobody would really have anything to contribute. You know, I mean, ideally, I can imagine a multigraph, a digital multigraph that has some theme and, you know, a network of tracks through various data sets and algorithms that propose different arguments. So you could have multiple scholars taking charge of multiple arguments or multiple parts of arguments, and getting, you know, tenure credit for that because it's the equivalent of, I don't know, a third of a monograph, quarter of a monograph, whatever it is. Just add them up, that's fine. But, you know, so you really have to imagine the inception differently. So I'm so glad you said that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if I could go past the end of it, to the end of the project, and return to the issue of citation. So the interactive model is great for brainstorming, learning, coming up with new ideas. But one of the advantages that the mass printing did, as you pointed out in your book, was that it created a stable form which then could be cited, and the development of citation follows the development of mass printing. How do we cite a virtual research environment in expecting that someone else then could follow that citation and see what we were looking at?
So that's where I'd want to use a URI. So this piece of this document is assigned a URI. Do you think that's possible? An RDF, a linked open data URI.
Well, of course, you can assign a URI to a chunk of text.
Yeah.
So I've had this problem with, say, Pleiades project, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Where I catch a typo on one of their entries. And I just want to let them know, hey, there's a typo. You want to fix it. I don't want it to be a big annotation. I don't want it to
No.
be preserved, but that's the only mechanism they have. So I publicly comment saying, hey, you have a typo. They get that, and they make the change I request. So they no longer have a typo, and I look like an idiot.
Yeah, that's bad. I mean, so stuff is being created now. The English short title catalog people at Riverside are creating an interface where, you know, all of us have all this knowledge about the text in the English short title catalog on our computers, you know, on 3x5 cards. We're going to go to our grave with it. But they're making an interface where you can actually say, oh no, this was not actually written by so-and-so, it was written by so-and-so, give your evidence. It gets uploaded, and it actually gets peer-reviewed by the librarians. And then, you know, your name would be added as a contributor. But you should theoretically just be able to go in and change the typo. Like, there needs to be levels, right? You see a typo, you should be able to change it, and somebody says, oh yeah, that was an S, and approves it, gone, you know? So you're obviously right. You want to distinguish among levels of annotation. You want to distinguish among levels of contribution. You want to make mechanisms for every sort.
But the typo example is perhaps a little distracting. In the larger example, so someone comes up with an argument, I have an idea, and actually I don't think the argument works for this reason, so I annotate. So they change their argument. So
Right.
if I separately say this person argued such, and someone else goes and looks at the argument and says, no, that's not what they argued at all.
Excellent. So you know what we need now? We're adding a feature to our multigraph. We're adding a versioning feature. Yeah, and so the annotation will apply to the previous version. And you know, the author should thank you in an annotation or something. Or maybe your annotation and the subsequent revisioning splinters off. I bet you that the Minnesota Press thing has versioning just for that reason. So excellent point, yeah.
I'm going to use language here that's out of my field, so pardon me if I use it incorrectly, but it seems to me that a good argument can be made that all of academia has had as one of its primary functions to curate the hierarchy of expertise in our various fields.
That's great.
And scarcity of output has been a shortcut, cheater version of as a tool for curators in this field of academia all this time. This is subverting that. And so you talked about it in terms of what it does to P&T committees, but it's not just because of its traditionality, it's because a tool has been taken away that's been used forever. How can we either, I mean, do we need to change what academia is and what academia big data world, or do we need to use some of this creativity to replace those tools for the curators?
That's such a brilliant question. Thank you so much. I'll cite it. That's really fabulous. And luckily I'll have the video, so I'll be able to hear it again. That is really a fabulous question, and I think that's exactly right. So, when universities first began, talk about information scarcity, so the professor would stand there and read, and people would copy down the text. Like it wasn't even, that was how you got your books, And so a sea change happened with print, obviously. And I think that's right. I think there's going to be another sea change. We're moving from, and precisely as you said, from an economy of information scarcity, where I, the lone scholar, travel to London to the archive and come back bearing good news to tell all of you benighted folks who can't travel there. Now, you can just go there with a click. And so now what? I actually think, though, and fake news is an example, it is even more important that scholars curate and reveal and develop tools for discerning expertise, much more important now than it was in a regime of information scarcity.
So Laura, then how do you keep someone who is not a scholar from annotating and putting in a barrage of comments for something that are naive or misleading, or not from someone who has the subject expertise?
Right. So I think expertise, we have to redefine our notion of expertise drastically. I think we've used it as a hammer to hit people over the head with, and as a mode of snobbery. I do think some of those naive comments can be incredibly insightful. I know you think that too. And some of them, of course, are gobbledygook, and some of them are spam bots, right? So how do you curate that? How do you editorially approve that? That's a huge question. The interesting thing about the Linked Open Data project that Susan Brown worked on is that DBpedia had the cleanest data, and that is a crowdsourced project. It's just that the people who are the crowd care deeply about following those rules. We have opened up all of our crowdsourced things to everybody. It's rare that you get deliberate malevolence. The Australian Newspaper Digitization Project got 3 million articles annotated in 3 years, and they just let people edit and let them save it. They didn't have the resources to edit it. So sure, there will be the occasional thing, and there might be ultimately developed algorithms for tracking those and getting rid of them automatically, as they surface, the way spam is now pretty controllable. So, but yeah, I think we have to drastically reconceive expertise, so that expertise is a generative rather than restrictive. You get the naive comment and you say, this is really excellent given this fact that you did not know, and
I guess expertise was a poor choice on my part. I just think of all of these kinds of comments that you can get,
yes.
in the Chronicle, from people who really have an opposing opinion to those who
Right.
have a soapbox.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's really a mess. I mean, you can do things like password protect it. There's all kinds of things you can do. I would like to see editorial mechanisms built, both automated and human.
So it goes through
A filter.
before it gets posted.
Right. Because the worst is, of course, all the flaming and all the anger. Yeah. But, I have to say, having been on many scholarly listservs, we are not immune to that.
But I would argue, though, that in this case, Chronicle articles, that that type of interaction could be helpful on a scholarly viewpoint also.
Yes.
So you're generating more
Data.
information, more data, more research potential, just by having those divergent pieces
Yes.
there.
Yes. And there's a lot of sentiment analysis that might help, given the flaming nature of a lot of it. And it can be used for sentiment analysis to enhance it. So I agree, if you had communication scholars, using those data sets, for instance, there could be some real research there. Yes?
I'm curious how, I'm familiar with Nines and 18th Connect and the peer reviewing kind of mechanism with that. What sort of letter or what kind of material do you provide, especially for people who are going out, when facing maybe hostile P&T committees or something?
Yes.
Sort of, what kind of mechanism is that kind of approach might be the way to try to help win over some of the
Right.
more Luddite, curmudgeon, whatever.
And Journal of Digital Humanities and Digital Humanities Now, they're trying to experiment with new forms of peer review. And Nines and 18th Connect, we're trying to make a bridge to the old forms of peer review. So we peer review a project, we say this is an excellent database, we say it contains an argument in the way that the data is designed, and that argument is clear to users so they're not being hoodwinked. We say all those things, and then we say, this is the equivalent of a book. This is the equivalent of an article. This is the equivalent. And I don't know how P&T committees are using it. I don't know how successful it is, but our editorial boards are as illustrious as Cambridge University Press editorial board. So, they can choose, but, we're really trying to bridge that gap.
So a lot of places have numeric systems where a book counts X number of points, or a peer-reviewed article this number of points.
Right.
It literally is math. There's others, the library is familiar with ours, but ours is a lot more holistic, and because digital is part of our wheelhouse, we do have a lot of project kind of things there, but I know from a lot of traditional subject areas, tend to have P&T committees that tend to be very lockstep in the way they look at things. So maybe that kind of equivalency is, at least for now, the best approach to try to get them to see this, as something which is scholarship rather than just
Yes.
entertainment.
And also getting really good reviewers for the tenure cases, outside reviewers. One year I reviewed 7 tenure cases because they needed digital experts, And I would say writing a Mellon grant I wrote one and it was harder than any book I've ever written, You just say those things, right? Because it's really, yeah. So, was there a question back there somewhere? No? People just, well, thank you so much. Keep a lookout for the digital multigraph, or build one. Thank you.